Hey everyone, I've had the AYANEO Pocket EVO for a couple of days at this point, and I've been putting it through its paces, getting some testing in. I wanted to get out my first impressions video, give my overall thoughts about it. There's a lot of things to like about it, and there's a couple things about it that I'm not a fan of, and we'll talk about that in this video, but I do have some more testing to do. So look for a future video, probably an episode of the NerdNest podcast where we talk more about this device. If you've never checked out an episode of the podcast, make sure that you subscribe so that you don't miss out when we do talk about this after some more testing. But let's talk about my first impressions with the Pocket Evo. This is a little handheld Android device with a really premium build quality. I like it a lot, but it's not perfect. Let's jump into it. This is the AYANEO Pocket EVO, and it's very similar to a previous handheld from AYANEO, and that's the AYANEO 2S. From my understanding, the systems are nearly identical down to using the exact same body, but the big difference between them is that the 2S was an x86 system, and this has an ARM chip. That means you're not running Windows on this, you're not running Linux on this. This is an Android device. And for me, Android devices mean retro gaming. Sure, you could load up games from the Play Store on the Pocket Evo, and it will run them like an absolute champ. But most of those games, not all, but most of them, are gotcha nonsense with horrible monetization strategies. So let's focus on retro games instead. And for retro, this is going to handle just about whatever you want to throw at it, including GameCube at 2x resolution, PS2 at 2x resolution. You could actually go higher than 2x resolution, but this only has a 1080p screen, so 2x resolution is really hitting that sweet spot. AYANEO sent me the most expensive unit, which has a really cool retro colorway, but you can also get it in white and in black. This one comes with a 1 terabyte high-speed flash storage, 24 gigs of LPDDR5X RAM, a Qualcomm Snapdragon G3X Gen 2 system on a chip with 8 cores on the CPU, and an Adreno A32 GPU, which outputs up to 15 watts TDP. The display is, like I said before, 1920 by 1080p. It's OLED with HDR up to 800 nits of peak brightness, a 100,000 to 1 contrast ratio, and a refresh rate of up to 165 hertz. Ooh, this thing is cooking. Let's talk about the body and the controls. First off, I love the way that this thing feels in the hand. It's got these nice big grips that your hands that just melts into your hands. It's really, really great. The front is really strange to me. The front is completely glass all the way across, and that means that the actual screen doesn't have any bezels on it, which is really strange looking, and I wish that every single device would do that. The one downside of having this all glass front means screen protectors leave a bump on it. So if AYANEO sent me a screen protector, which is really great, but putting a screen protector on here, now I would feel that bump of the display. So I do kind of wish it was recessed just a little bit so that when I put the screen protector on there, it kind of went away. But what are you going to do? Let's talk about the joysticks. Both joysticks are Hall effect joysticks. They feel really good, and they feel really premium as well. It looks to me like they're metal, although I'm not 1000% sure. The face buttons are fine. I'm not a huge fan of this layout with the sticks on with the right stick below the face buttons, but when you're actually using it, my hand really isn't bumping into that thumbstick too much, so I think it's okay. The face buttons themselves feel pretty good. I have no complaints about those. Let's take a look at the left-hand side. We have our D-pad here. This D-pad, I don't love this D-pad. There's a lot of other D-pads that I've used before that are much better. In fact, I recently did a review of the AYANEO Pocket DMG, which I'll leave a link down in the description down below so you can check that out. And I very much prefer the Pocket DMG's D-pad to the D-pad on the Pocket Evo. I almost forgot the name of it. You've got your start and select buttons right down here. This button right here is your Android menu button. Here you've got your ISpace button, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and then you've got another secondary button right here. Along the top, we have some extra buttons that are programmable for, whatever it is that you feel like you need to do. We've got our bumpers right here, our triggers. The triggers on this are fantastic. Nice long throw on these triggers. It feels great. My camera's having trouble focusing on that. Sorry about that. And overall, I think that the controls on this are great. Also along the top, we have this switch, which allows you to quickly switch between the different modes. And when I say modes, what I'm talking about are right up here. You can see that we have these different performance modes. We have battery saving, balance, streaming, game, and max. Now, I have no need to use max on this thing. Most of the time, I am spending in battery saving mode. But if you want to toggle between those without pressing this button to bring up that menu, then you can simply just push this little toggle and it switches between each one of those other modes. It's a little hard for me to reach from where the camera is here, but as you can see, it's going through all of those different modes. Here's max mode, and then I'm going to switch back over to battery saving mode. I will say that when you're in max mode, the fan of this thing gets really loud, but I never use max mode. I never feel the need to use max mode, so the fan being loud really hasn't affected me at all. You also have a fingerprint scanner right up here, so you can just touch it when if I close it and I'll open it with the wrong finger, it's going to tell me to use the right finger. So then I just try it on the correct finger, and now it's going to jump me right into where I need to be. We've got our volume rocker right there. On the back, we have our air intake. We have some passive cooling down here, and on the top we have our output for our fans. And then on the bottom we have our USB-C, which also has HDMI out basically. And then here's where you put your SD card. This is your microphone input, and the speakers are right down here on the bottom as well. Overall, I think that this is a really, really nice setup, and I'm a fan, except for the D-pad, and except for the D-pad. That's really the only thing about this that I don't like so far. Now, of course, you can go through and you can play just about anything that you want on here. If I'm going to jump into, we'll say, Nintendo Entertainment System, and I'll scroll through, find a random game, The Bard's Tale, and if I click on that, it's going to jump in. I'm currently running this in RetroArch, which I'm a huge fan of RetroArch. And if you ever have trouble setting up RetroArch, there's a great video from Retro Game Core that you should check out. I will try and remember to link down below so that you can check that out. But here you can see I've jumped into the game, and it's running fantastic, but not a huge surprise. This is a Nintendo Entertainment System game. So let's go ahead and close that, and we'll go to, oops, I just started it up again. Here you can see I'm running Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time for the GameCube, and I'm hitting about 25 frames per second, and that's because I'm on the battery saving. So I'm going to move that over to balance, and we'll see what that actually does. And now you can see if I bring this up here, I'm hitting 30 frames per second, almost locked, and it seems to be running pretty well. Sorry about the reflections. My setup is not great for dealing with reflections and stuff like that, but 30 frames per second on a game like this is great because that was the native resolution for all the console ports of the Prince of Persia games. So that's GameCube. Let's jump over to PlayStation 2. Here you can see I'm playing Dynasty Warriors 4 for the PS2 at 2x resolution, and the system's having absolutely no problem hitting 60 frames per second. And as you can see, I'm currently in balance mode. I'm not even on the full draw. Up here on the performance monitor, you can see it's currently running at about 3.2 watts, and the battery in this is an 8600 milliamp hour battery. Now, if you're somebody who really wants to emulate PSP games, you can see here I'm playing Gran Turismo at 2x resolution, hitting 60 frames per second. I'm currently in the balanced mode, no problem. And one of the reasons that this is such a great device for emulating PSP games is because it has that 16:9 aspect ratio. So you're getting no black bars, not on the top, not on the side, nowhere. And that means that it's completely filling up the entire viewport, and it just looks awesome. I absolutely love the look of a bezel-less screen. Huge fan of what AYANEO has done with this device. And at this point, I think I have to talk about the price. The price of this thing, there's a bunch of different SKUs for it. The one that they sent me was the most expensive one, which when it's in early bird pricing, it's $639. And when it's, in full retail, it's going to be $799. Now, would I pay $800 for this particular device? No, I would not. However, and this is where I'm going to get a lot of people pushing back against me, I don't think it's overpriced. And the reason I don't think the reason I say that is because, yes, you can get other devices that can do what this device does. In fact, one of those devices would be not the limited edition AYANEO Pocket EVO. You could get the white one or the black one, which comes in at $389 for early bird pricing or $500 for regular retail pricing. So a lot of people will look at the fact that I got the most expensive one, they'll see that $800 price and they'll say, this is overpriced. I don't agree with that. In the same way that I could drive somewhere in my Volkswagen, no problem, and somebody else could get there in a Ferrari. And do I think a Ferrari is overpriced? No. But would I buy a Ferrari for that price? No, I wouldn't. Just because something is more expensive than I want it to be doesn't mean that it's overpriced. And don't look at the highest SKU of this, because it does pretty much all the same stuff that the lower SKUs do. And the lower SKUs will be a whole lot cheaper, and then you can just throw a big SD card in there and not have to worry about that extra storage. And the faster storage doesn't do all that much for it, and the 24 gigs of RAM doesn't really do that much for it either. So I think that when you're looking at a device like this, $500 I think is fair. Of course, I also feel like it's important to point out that you could get an OLED Steam Deck for pretty close to this price, and it's a little bit more bulky. The refresh rate of the screen is not as high, but you can do a lot more with that device. So, you know, you're going to have to weigh your pros and cons and decide what works best for you. And now let's take a look at the D-pad. I've loaded up Contra so that we can try out the Contra test. The way the Contra test works is you hold down on the D-pad and then you just rock back and forth and see how many bad inputs you get. Like, my character should not be moving right now because I'm not hitting right and I'm not hitting left, but my character is still moving and he's about to get killed. There we go, almost died. You can see that it's failing the Contra test, but if it's failing the Contra test, that usually means it's going to be pretty okay at stuff like Street Fighter. So let's jump into Street Fighter and see how we can do on the Hadoukens and Shoryukens. And here you can see I'm playing Street Fighter 3. The Hadoukens are going pretty well. I'm not missing too many of those. Again, I'm not a huge fan of the D-pad, but it's something I could get used to if I had to. I just wish that AYANEO had picked a different D-pad to go with. Now I'm going to switch over to Shoryukens. Not too bad. I think that I could pull it off. I don't like the way that the D-pad feels. I feel it like it's very, very mushy. I wish it was just a little bit more clicky. But overall, I think that this is good for, you know, all-around stuff. Not my favorite D-pad, but not the worst D-pad I've ever used either. All right, let's take a look at the fan, which is crazy loud if you go into max settings. So here I've got my microphone that I will set right in front of the fan. Here's the fan's outtake, and then there's the microphone right there. I'm going to put it on max. Listen to this. And now that the fan test is done, I'm going to put the microphone down where the speakers are. I'm going to start up a game, and we'll hear how the audio is at different volumes. Okay, I've got Daytona USA for the Dreamcast running. Let's go ahead and throw some volume on there. This is at the minimum volume. I mean, not muted, but just one touch up. And now I'm going to increase it a little bit more. These speakers obviously get way louder than you need them to be. So I guess I'd rather them be too loud than too quiet, especially because I can turn them back down. But there you have it. There's your audio test. Well, let me know in the comment section down below what you think of the Pocket Evo. And before you take off, make sure you check out this video right here. YouTube seems to think it's perfect for you. From the Nerd Nest, I'm Bill. Stay rad. Thanks for watching.